Today, we're diving into the life of Monica Lewinsky, a name you undoubtedly recognize, but whose story goes far beyond the headlines. She's been called everything from a villain to a victim.
Right.
But what's the real Monica Lewinsky?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, it's fascinating how she's gone from, well, being right at the center of this huge political scandal to becoming this powerful advocate for things like anti-bullying
Yeah.
and mental health awareness.
It makes you wonder, who is she beyond those labels?
Exactly. To understand that, I think we need to rewind back to the 90s.
Okay.
So Monica Lewinsky was in her early 20s, a recent college grad, who landed an internship at the White House during President Bill Clinton's first term.
And that's where this whole saga begins, right?
Yeah.
She's 22. He's 49.
Big difference.
Already a massive power differential, and they enter into this affair.
And that age gap, it immediately raises questions about the dynamics of power at play, something that Lewinsky herself has been very outspoken about
Yeah.
in recent years.
So let's unpack what happened next.
Okay.
So the affair comes out in 1998, triggering this media explosion unlike anything we'd seen before.
Right.
It leads to Clinton's impeachment,
Yeah.
though he's later acquitted by the Senate.
Right. But the real fallout, the lasting impact, is on Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah.
She becomes the target of relentless public shaming and ridicule, a lot of it with this deeply misogynistic tone. That's pretty jarring to look back on now.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the court of public opinion.
No.
She had to face. There were actual legal battles, threats of jail time.
Oh, wow.
27 years. Can you imagine?
Gosh, no.
All for submitting a false statement. And it gets even crazier. They even threatened her mother.
What?
With prison if she didn't cooperate with the investigation.
It's almost unfathomable, the pressure she was under. A young woman in her 20s facing this political and legal machine.
You can see why she basically vanished from public life for a long time after that.
Yeah, for sure. It took almost 2 decades for her to start reclaiming her story. Around 2014, she wrote this really powerful essay for Vanity Fair. And it was incredibly raw and honest. She talked about grappling with PTSD, even having suicidal thoughts.
Wow.
Because of the intense trauma of that whole experience.
That essay was a turning point, I think.
Yeah.
It felt like she was finally ready to speak her truth.
And she didn't stop there. She channeled that pain and anger into something really meaningful. She became this powerful voice against bullying and an advocate for mental health.
Her TED Talk in 2015.
Yes.
About the price of public shaming. It was such a defining moment.
It was.
It went viral and really helped to reshape how people saw her.
It did. It really did. She went from being this figure of scandal to someone who could articulate the devastating effects of online harassment and this need for empathy in our digital world.
Yeah. And now she's taken that conversation even further with her own podcast, Reclaiming.
It's such a fascinating space. She explores ideas of resilience, reinvention, and taking ownership of your experiences, even the really painful ones.
And one of the most striking things she's done recently is on the Call Her Daddy podcast. She was so direct about her feelings towards Bill Clinton, saying he should have resigned or at least handled the situation very differently.
Wow, she's not holding back anymore, is she?
No, she's making it clear that she feels he put the blame on her to protect himself.
Right.
Essentially throwing her under the bus to preserve his own reputation.
Yeah, and that gets to the heart of something so important, this double standard that often plays out in these kinds of situations.
It's a stark reminder of how women are treated in the public eye compared to men, especially when it comes to scandals like this. Her story has such strong echoes of the Me Too movement and the conversations we're finally having about power dynamics in the workplace and beyond.
And what's so remarkable is that even after all she went through, Monica Lewinsky has managed to find a way to not only reclaim her own narrative, but use her platform to advocate for others and push for positive change.
Her story is far from over. It's a story of resilience, of finding your voice, and turning pain into purpose.
Absolutely. And in part 2, we'll delve deeper into her current work, particularly her podcast, Reclaiming, and explore how her public image has evolved over the years.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what lessons we can glean from her experiences.
Yeah.
And how they connect to the bigger conversations happening in society right now.
Totally.
So we were talking about Reclaiming, her podcast. It's amazing how she's taken control of her narrative, turned it into a platform for like positive change and all that.
It is. What's interesting about Reclaiming, I think, is it's not just about her story, you know? It's like she uses it as a springboard to talk about these broader, more universal themes of resilience, reinvention, owning your experiences, even the really tough ones.
Yeah, and she brings in all these different voices,
Yeah,
right?
she does.
People who've gone through really challenging things, experts on social justice, all kinds of perspectives.
It really shows that she's not interested in, like, just dwelling on the past or staying stuck in that one moment. She's trying to use what she went through to, like, spark these conversations and maybe even help people find their own strength.
Right, and speaking of using her experience for good, she's also been doing some really cool stuff outside of the podcast too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like those fashion campaigns encouraging people to register to vote and be more engaged citizens, especially targeting younger generations.
It's really smart, right? Tapping into something that's relevant to a younger audience and using it to promote positive action.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it shows that she hasn't lost her sense of humor or her ability to kind of connect with people in a genuine way, even after everything.
Yeah. There's a real authenticity to her, I think.
Yeah.
Whether she's giving a TED Talk or partnering with a fashion brand.
And speaking of how people see her, it's incredible to think about how much her public image has evolved, hasn't it?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, in the beginning, she was portrayed as this, like, villain, a temptress, even reduced to a punchline.
It was brutal.
It was.
But it feels like as time has gone on, and as she started to speak out more for herself, there's been a real shift, right?
Totally.
In how people perceive her.
And I think the #MeToo movement played a huge role in that shift.
Oh, absolutely.
It forced everyone to re-examine how we talk about women who are caught up in these types of scandals. Suddenly there was this greater awareness of power dynamics.
Right.
And the ways women are often unfairly blamed and shamed in these situations.
Oh,
And Monica Lewinsky has been really vocal about connecting her own experience to that larger #MeToo conversation.
yeah.
She's made the point that back when the scandal happened, we just didn't have the same language or understanding around these issues.
Right.
The idea of consent, the nuances of power dynamics, those just weren't part of the mainstream conversation back then.
No, they weren't.
So because of that, she was essentially silenced and demonized by the media. There's no space for her perspective.
And now, with hindsight and a more nuanced understanding of these dynamics, people are starting to see her differently. Not as this, like, temptress who brought down a president, but as a young woman who was taken advantage of by a man.
Right.
In a position of immense power.
And someone who is treated unfairly by the media and the public, to say the least.
At the very least, yeah. It's a powerful reminder that our understanding of events can change over time, and that it's important to be open to new perspectives, new interpretations.
Yeah, but it's also a testament to her resilience and her determination to take back control of her own story. She could have easily let the events of the past define her,
Right.
but she didn't. She's used them as fuel for growth, for advocacy.
And in doing so, she's become this powerful voice for change, inspiring others to speak out against injustice and fight for a more equitable world.
It's truly inspiring. What strikes me most about her is that she refuses to be defined by just this one chapter, you know?
Uh-huh.
She's shown us that it's possible to grow from adversity, to learn from mistakes, and to use our experiences to make a real positive impact on the world.
Yeah, I agree.
There are so many different layers to her story, aren't there?
Oh, yeah.
Like it touches on power dynamics and media scrutiny to public shaming.
Yeah.
And even like the evolution of how we understand consent, right?
You're so right. It's like all these threads weaving together to shape both her individual experience and the broader conversations we're having as a society.
And it makes you think, how differently might things have played out if this all happened today?
Right.
In the age of #MeToo and social media.
I know. It's a fascinating question to consider, right? I mean, the way we talk about these kinds of situations has changed so drastically. I mean, there's a much greater awareness now of power imbalances, and there's more support for victims of sexual harassment and assault. I mean, back then, she was essentially silenced. The media painted this very specific picture of her, and she didn't really have many avenues to share her side of the story.
Right.
But with the rise of social media and platforms like podcasts, she's been able to reclaim her narrative and have more control over her own message.
It's incredibly empowering.
It is.
It gives her that ability to challenge the narrative that was created around her and kind of present a more nuanced, more authentic version of herself.
Right. And it's such a powerful example of how no matter what you've been through or how you've been portrayed, you always have the power to reclaim your own story.
It might take time. It might not be easy, but
It's definitely possible.
Be-
Monica Lewinsky is living proof.
yeah, for sure. It's also a reminder that we should all be a little more critical of the information we consume, especially from the media. We shouldn't just accept things at face value.
Right.
We need to be willing to hear different perspectives and consider all sides of the story, especially when dealing with complex and sensitive topics
Absolutely.
like this.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Monica Lewinsky's life and work, what stands out to you the most?
Honestly, it's her resilience. I mean, she faced such intense public humiliation, scrutiny, adversity, but instead of letting it break her, she found a way to channel that experience into something so positive. She's become this advocate, a voice for others, a true inspiration.
I couldn't agree more. Her story really makes you think about how we treat each other, the power of forgiveness, and the importance of giving people second chances.
If you're interested in hearing more from Monica Lewinsky directly, I highly recommend checking out her podcast, Reclaiming. You'll hear about her experiences, her insights, and her incredible journey of healing and growth, all in her own words.
It's a really fascinating listen, and it might even challenge some of your preconceived notions.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and work of Monica Lewinsky.
It's been a pleasure.